I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
What happens when a king reaches his breaking point? On a storm-swept October evening in 2025,
this is not a surprise to anybody. It's really sad that it's got to this point, but I've got to do something for my own mental health, for my wife's, and for Archie's as well, because I could see where this was headed.
behind the imposing walls of Buckingham Palace, King Charles III did something unprecedented, something that would send shockwaves through the monarchy and beyond. In a dimly lit study, surrounded by portraits of monarchs past, he pressed record on a camera and delivered a message that was raw, unfiltered, and aimed directly at his daughter-in-law, Meghan Markle. But what could drive a monarch, known for measured diplomacy, to such a dramatic public stance? What was said in those crucial moments that would fundamentally alter the relationship between the Sussexes and the royal family? And why did King Charles choose Catherine, Princess of Wales, to become the gatekeeper between Meghan and the crown? The answers lie in a web of scandal, repeated pleas for intervention, and a family divide that has been widening for years. This isn't just another chapter in royal drama. This is the moment when boundaries were drawn in permanent ink, when consequences became unavoidable, and when the future direction of the monarchy was fundamentally altered. The letters that crossed the line. Before we understand the king's explosive response, we need to examine what led to it. For months, perhaps even years, a pattern of correspondence had been building. These weren't casual family notes or holiday greetings. These were formal letters, urgent in tone, seeking something the palace could no longer provide: protection from the gathering storm. According to sources with intimate knowledge of palace operations, Meghan Markle had been writing repeatedly to King Charles. The letters began as early as 2023, initially addressing matters of unconscious bias within the family.
Clear to everybody, there is no subject that's off-limit.
Concerns that had first surfaced publicly during her bombshell 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey. But as time progressed and new controversies emerged, the nature of these communications evolved dramatically. By 2024 and into 2025, as Jeffrey Epstein's case files continued their relentless drip of unsealed documents, Meghan's name appeared in peripheral discussions. Court testimonies from witnesses like Johanna Joberg mentioned Epstein boasting about knowing various celebrities, including the Duchess of Sussex. Were these mentions substantive? Legal experts and fact-checkers have repeatedly confirmed they were not. Meghan's name appeared only in passing, with no evidence whatsoever of direct meetings or involvement. But in the ruthless court of public opinion and tabloid speculation, nuance rarely survives. The mere association, however tangential, created a media firestorm. And it was this firestorm that prompted Meghan to seek palace intervention, to request the institution use its considerable influence to clarify, defend, or at minimum, provide guidance on managing the onslaught. Can you imagine the desperation of writing letter after letter, seeking support from an institution you once represented, only to be met with silence? Or worse, with a firm no. Charles had already faced this dilemma with his own brother. Prince Andrew's associations with Epstein had destroyed his public role, led to the loss of his military titles, and resulted in his effective exile from royal duties. In October 2025, Charles took the most dramatic step yet, stripping Andrew of remaining honors and reportedly initiating eviction proceedings from royal residences. The message was clear. The crown would not shield those entangled in scandal, regardless of blood ties. Now history was repeating itself, but with a crucial difference. Unlike Andrew, Meghan had no direct involvement in any wrongdoing. Yet Charles saw a dangerous pattern. Repeated requests for intervention that could compromise the monarchy's carefully maintained position of non-involvement in personal, legal, or media matters. Each letter Meghan sent represented another pressure point, another test of where the boundaries lay between family support and institutional integrity, and with each unanswered plea, the tension built, like storm clouds gathering before lightning strikes. The breaking point. A king's anger unleashed. What does it take to push a monarch beyond diplomatic restraint? For King Charles III, that moment arrived on a rain-drenched evening in late October 2025. The thunder rolling over London seemed to echo the turmoil that had been building within him for months, perhaps years. Charles, who had spent his entire life mastering the art of royal composure, who had weathered decades of public scrutiny with measured responses and carefully worded statements, made a decision that shocked even his closest advisors. He would speak directly, without the filtering lens of palace communications, without the careful polish of drafted speeches. He would say exactly what he felt needed to be said. The study where he recorded the message reflected the weight of the moment. Antique bookshelves lined with histories of past reigns, portraits of monarchs who had faced their own crises, and the single lamp casting long shadows that made the room feel almost theatrical in its gravity. This wasn't a stateroom prepared for formal addresses. This was personal territory, which made what followed all the more striking. As the red recording light blinked on, Charles's voice carried an edge rarely, if ever, heard from the sovereign. His words were precise, deliberate, and unmistakable in their intent. Mrs. Meghan Markle has repeatedly written to the palace seeking our intervention in the Epstein matter. But like Andrew, she must face her own consequences. The crown cannot shield her. If press or authorities inquire, Catherine will address it. Catherine will speak on my behalf. Let those words sink in for a moment. A sitting monarch speaking about a member of his own family, his son's wife, the mother of his grandchildren, drawing an explicit parallel to his disgraced brother. Can you feel the weight of that comparison, the finality of that boundary? But perhaps even more significant than what he said was how he said it. This wasn't the calm, pastoral tone Charles uses when discussing environmental initiatives or visiting communities. This was frustration boiled over, exasperation given voice, and a line drawn with iron certainty. Sources who were present in the palace that evening described the king pacing after the recording, the reality of what he'd just done settling over him. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment outburst. Charles doesn't operate that way. This was the culmination of carefully considered options, exhausted patience, and the realization that traditional family diplomacy had failed. Why record it at all? Royal experts suggest this wasn't initially intended for public consumption, but rather as a private communication to be shared within a tight circle of senior advisors and family members, a way to make his position unambiguously clear. The subsequent leak, whether intentional or accidental, transformed a private declaration into a public crisis. The most revealing aspect of the video wasn't just the parallel to Andrew. It was the empowerment of Catherine. In choosing the Princess of Wales as his designated spokesperson on these matters, Charles made several calculated decisions simultaneously. First, he created a buffer between himself and direct confrontation, maintaining the monarch's position above family squabbles while still ensuring his will would be executed. Second, he elevated Catherine's already significant role in crisis management, publicly acknowledging her skills in handling sensitive communications. And third, he sent an unmistakable message about who held power within the family structure and who did not. Have you ever witnessed a moment when years of tension finally explode? When careful diplomacy gives way to stark honesty? That's what this video represented. A king who had simply had enough. Catherine, the strategic choice. Why Catherine? Of all the possible spokespersons, advisors, or senior royals who could have been tasked with handling inquiries about the Epstein matter and Meghan's peripheral connection to it, why did King Charles specifically choose the Princess of Wales? The answer reveals as much about Catherine's evolution within the monarchy as it does about Charles's strategic thinking. This wasn't a random delegation of duties. It was a calculated decision based on years of observing how Catherine handles pressure, scandal, and the relentless scrutiny of modern royal life. Let's consider Catherine's track record. When she faced the photo editing controversy in 2024, accusations that Mother's Day images had been digitally altered, she didn't hide behind palace statements or allow communications teams to craft vague non-responses. Instead, she issued a direct personal apology, owning the mistake with transparency that felt refreshingly modern. The incident could have spiraled into a larger crisis about trust and authenticity. Instead, her handling diffused it within days. Then came her most personal and profound public moment, the video announcement of her cancer diagnosis in March 2024.
Support and for your understanding whilst I've been recovering from surgery.
Seated on a bench in Windsor, speaking directly to camera with William beside her, Catherine shared deeply private medical information with remarkable poise and vulnerability. The response was overwhelming. Not just sympathy, but genuine appreciation for her courage in making the royal family human and relatable. How many times have we seen royals hide behind formal statements during personal crises? How often are health matters shrouded in vague palace announcements that fuel speculation rather than provide clarity? Catherine's approach represented a new model of royal communication, one that acknowledges the public's interest while maintaining dignity, that shares enough to satisfy curiosity without exploiting private suffering for sympathy. This communication style has become her signature. At the 2025 Future Workforce Summit, delivering her first major public speech after cancer treatment, Catherine didn't just talk about professional development. She wove in deeper themes about prioritizing relationships, about the importance of love and tenderness alongside ambition, about building lives of meaning rather than just achievement. Business leaders who attended described feeling moved in ways they hadn't expected from a royal appearance. But beyond her public-facing skills, there's a strategic dimension to Catherine's role that makes her ideal for the Epstein-related inquiries. Unlike other senior royals, she has maintained a reputation almost entirely untouched by scandal. She hasn't given explosive interviews revealing family secrets. She hasn't been photographed in compromising situations. She doesn't engage with tabloid narratives or respond to speculation on social media. This pristine reputation creates credibility. When Catherine speaks, there's no baggage of past controversies coloring how her words are received. If she were to address questions about Meghan's peripheral mention in Epstein documents, her statement would carry weight precisely because she has no agenda beyond representing the Crown's position. There's also a subtle but significant element of protection in Charles's choice. By designating Catherine as spokesperson, he shields himself from direct entanglement in what could become a messy, drawn-out media battle. The monarch remains above the fray while his most trusted and capable representative handles the details. It's brilliant positioning that preserves the throne's dignity while still exercising control over the narrative. Think about the implicit hierarchy this creates. Charles doesn't speak to Meghan directly. He doesn't engage with the letters. Instead, any communication must flow through Catherine, a woman Meghan has had a complicated relationship with, to put it mildly. Reports of tension between the two duchesses have circulated for years, from alleged disagreements about wedding preparations in 2018 to broader differences in approach to royal duties. By placing Catherine as the gatekeeper, Charles creates a barrier that's both practical and symbolic. It says, if you want to communicate with the institution, you must go through its most exemplary current representative. It says, The days of direct access are over. It says there are consequences to stepping away from royal duties, and one of them is losing the protections that come with being inside the institution. Can you imagine how this designation felt to Meghan, thousands of miles away in California, reading or hearing about the video? The woman she'd had tensions with was now the only authorized voice on matters directly affecting her reputation. Catherine herself, according to sources close to the palace, approached this new responsibility with characteristic caution. While she's proven adept at public communications, speaking on behalf of the king about scandal-adjacent matters involving family members represents new territory. Those close to her describe a desire to handle any inquiries with empathy while maintaining the firm boundaries Charles has demanded. This balance, empathy and firmness, might be exactly what the situation requires. And it's a balance Catherine has demonstrated she can strike. The Epstein shadow, understanding the scandal's reach. To fully grasp why King Charles drew such a hard line, we must understand the suffocating shadow that Jeffrey Epstein's scandal continues to cast over public figures worldwide, and how it has haunted the royal family specifically for over a decade. Jeffrey Epstein, the financier whose network of power and influence spanned celebrities, politicians, academics, and royals, became a symbol of unchecked privilege and its darkest potential abuses. His arrest in 2019 on federal charges of sex trafficking minors, his mysterious death in custody, and the subsequent investigations have created ripple effects that continue to expand years later. For the British royal family, Epstein represents their greatest modern scandal through Prince Andrew's association with him, the Duke of York's friendship with Epstein, his visits to Epstein's properties, his relationship with Ghislaine Maxwell, and most damningly, the allegations from Virginia Giuffre that she was trafficked to have sexual encounters with Andrew. All of this has been devastating. Andrew's disastrous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, where he claimed he couldn't have been at a London nightclub with Giuffre because he was at a Pizza Express in Woking, and suggested his inability to sweat made allegations against him impossible, became an instant case study in crisis mismanagement. Rather than diffusing the situation, his explanations strained credulity and invited more scrutiny. The consequences were swift and severe. Within days of the interview, Andrew stepped back from public duties. Major charities distanced themselves from his patronages, and King Charles, then Prince of Wales, reportedly began planning for Andrew's eventual complete removal from royal life, a plan executed in stages over the following years. By October 2025, that removal was nearly total. Charles stripped Andrew of remaining titles, initiated eviction proceedings from Royal Lodge, and made clear through actions and occasional public statements that the Crown would not provide sanctuary from consequences. When heckled about Andrew during a visit to Lichfield, Charles didn't deflect or defend. He acknowledged the questions and reiterated his commitment to accountability. This context is crucial for understanding Charles's response to Meghan's situation. In the king's view, he had already established a clear precedent. Association with Epstein-related matters meant facing consequences independently, without palace intervention or protection. The Crown's reputation could not be repeatedly jeopardized by defending or shielding individuals caught in the scandal's expanding web. But here's where Meghan's situation differs significantly from Andrew's, and where the controversy becomes more complex. Andrew had actual documented relationships with Epstein and Maxwell spanning years. Photographs exist of them together. Flight logs place him on Epstein's plane. His own admissions confirm the friendship. Meghan's connection to the Epstein matter is exponentially more tenuous. Her name appeared in court documents from witnesses who recalled Epstein boasting about knowing various celebrities. That's it. No photographs together. No flight logs. No confirmed meetings. No allegations of wrongdoing whatsoever. Legal experts and reputable journalists who have covered the Epstein case extensively have repeatedly emphasized this distinction. Meghan's peripheral mention in documents is the kind of name-dropping that appeared frequently in witness testimonies. Epstein often claimed connections to famous people as a way of elevating his status. The mentions prove nothing beyond Epstein's tendency towards social climbing and exaggeration. Yet in the fevered ecosystem of tabloid journalism and social media speculation, these distinctions get lost. Headlines blur the lines between actual involvement and tangential mentions. Conspiracy theories flourish, and reputations get damaged by association, however unfair that association might be. This is what drove Meghan to write to Charles repeatedly. From her perspective in California, watching her name get dragged through media coverage of one of the most sordid scandals in recent history, despite having no actual connection to it, must have felt like a nightmare. And her expectation, perhaps naive, perhaps reasonable depending on your perspective, was that the institution she had once represented would at minimum clarify the facts or provide guidance on managing the attacks. Why did Charles refuse? His position, as articulated in the video, rests on several pillars. First, the precedent argument. If he intervened for Meghan when he didn't for Andrew, what message would that send? Second, the institutional boundary. The Crown cannot be seen as a fixer for every media controversy involving current or former royals, or it becomes complicit in those controversies. Third, the practical consideration. Any palace statement about Meghan and Epstein, even one clarifying her lack of involvement, would generate more headlines and more speculation, potentially doing more harm than good. But there's also likely a more personal dimension that Charles wouldn't articulate publicly. The years of tension with the Sussexes, the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, Harry's memoir Spare, the constant stream of grievances aired publicly, have exhausted the family's goodwill. From Charles's perspective, Meghan and Harry chose independence. They stepped away from royal duties and protections. They forged their own path. And with that independence comes the reality of handling your own crises without palace support. Is this fair? That's a question that has divided public opinion sharply. Some view Charles's stance as admirably principled, a refusal to play favorites, a commitment to institutional integrity over family sentiment. Others see it as cold, even cruel, abandoning a family member to face baseless allegations without support, particularly when that family member is a woman of color who has faced uniquely intense and often racially tinged media attacks. Adding fuel to this fire have been claims from Ghislaine Maxwell herself, now serving a prison sentence for her role in Epstein's trafficking operation. In 2025, Maxwell made allegations about knowing details of Meghan's Hollywood past, suggestions she has leveraged in various communications seeking better treatment or early release. These claims have been uniformly dismissed by credible sources as attention-seeking manipulations by a convicted criminal, but they've nevertheless been amplified by tabloids eager for sensational angles. It's in this toxic mix of legitimate scandal, Andrew, tangential mentions, Meghan, and outright fabrications, Maxwell's claims, that Charles made his decision. Rather than wade into the swamp trying to parse what deserves attention and what doesn't, he drew a single firm line. The Crown stays out of it entirely. But at what cost to family relationships? And with what long-term implications for the monarchy's role in protecting its members? The aftermath. A family fractured. When fragments of King Charles's video began circulating, whether through intentional leaks or security breaches remains unclear, the royal family's response revealed the depth of existing fractures and created new ones. Prince William, heir to the throne, and a man who has watched his family's struggles play out in devastating public ways throughout his life, reportedly offered quiet but firm support for his father's position. This wasn't surprising to those who have followed William's evolution into his role. He has long taken a harder line than Charles on matters of institutional protection, having witnessed firsthand how scandal and dysfunction can undermine the monarchy's standing. William's relationship with his uncle Andrew had already deteriorated to the point where insiders describe barely concealed contempt. He reportedly referred to Andrew internally as someone who needed to be removed from the picture entirely, viewing him as a liability the family could no longer afford. This same protective instinct toward the institution now extended to the Meghan situation. But William's support for his father's stance also reflects the ongoing rift with his brother Harry. The brothers, once close confidants who supported each other through their mother's death and the pressures of royal life, have barely spoken in recent years. The revelations in Harry's memoir, including private conversations, physical altercations, and accusations about William's behavior, crossed lines that William views as unforgivable. From William's perspective, the Sussexes made their choice. They pursued independence, financial autonomy, and life outside the royal framework. With that choice came the loss of palace protections, resources, and support systems. It might seem harsh, but it's also logical. You can't have it both ways, demanding freedom from royal constraints while expecting royal privileges when convenient. Catherine's reaction to her new designated role was more nuanced, according to palace sources. While she understood the strategic reasoning and accepted the responsibility, those close to her describe real concern about becoming the face of family division. Catherine has worked hard to maintain a reputation as someone who values family harmony, who avoids public feuds, who represents stability rather than conflict. Being positioned as the gatekeeper who effectively blocks Meghan's access to family support sits uncomfortably with that image. Yet she also recognizes the impossible position Charles is in, trying to modernize and protect an ancient institution while managing family members whose actions threaten it. Her approach, they say, will be to handle any inquiries with as much empathy and diplomatic nuance as possible, while maintaining the boundaries Charles has demanded. Think about the impossible balancing act this represents for Catherine. How do you speak authoritatively on behalf of the king about family matters while not appearing vindictive or petty? How do you maintain firm boundaries while not seeming cold? How do you protect the institution while preserving whatever possibility might exist for eventual family reconciliation? Across the Atlantic in California, the video landed like a bomb. Meghan's team, according to sources with knowledge of their response, viewed it as a devastating and very public rebuff, confirmation that the bridges back to family acceptance had been definitively burned. The choice of Catherine as spokesperson particularly stung. The two women's relationship has been fraught for years, with reports of disagreements over everything from wedding planning to royal protocol to parenting approaches. Whether these tensions were ever as dramatic as tabloids suggested is debatable, but there's no question that the relationship has been complicated at best. For Meghan, having the woman she'd had difficulties with now designated as the sole authorized voice on matters affecting her reputation represented a particular kind of humiliation. It reinforced feelings that the family had never truly accepted her, had never been willing to offer the support they provided more traditional members, and was now quite literally putting a barrier between her and any possibility of institutional assistance. The psychological impact cannot be understated. Imagine being thousands of miles from your husband's family, watching your name get associated with one of the most notorious scandals in recent history, despite having no connection to it, writing repeatedly for help or guidance, and then having your father-in-law publicly declare not only that you're on your own, but that someone else will speak for the family if anyone asks about you. Friends of the Sussexes described Meghan as deeply hurt, but also resigned. One more example, in her view, of how the institution prioritizes its image over protecting its people, particularly those it views as outsiders. The video reinforced her belief that stepping away was the right choice, even as it made that separation feel more permanent and painful. Harry's position in all this is perhaps the most agonizing. This is his father drawing hard lines against his wife. This is his brother supporting those boundaries. This is his sister-in-law becoming the official voice of family rejection. And he's caught between loyalties: to the woman he chose and built a life with, and to the family and institution he was born into. Harry has remained largely silent publicly about the video and its implications, but his past statements and writings provide context for his likely feelings. In Spare, he described the family's failure to protect or support Meghan during earlier media attacks, detailing moments when palace communications teams would throw them under the bus to protect other family members. This video, in his eyes, likely represents more of the same pattern. The book also revealed Harry's awareness of how Epstein associations affected the family, including specific discussions about how Andrew's scandal impacted security arrangements and public perceptions. He understands the stakes involved. But he also sees a fundamental difference between his uncle's actual involvement and his wife's completely tangential mention in documents. From Harry's perspective, the family is once again failing a basic test of loyalty and protection. From Charles and William's perspective, Harry and Meghan brought much of their current isolation on themselves through years of public grievances and revelations. Both perspectives have validity. Both are probably incomplete. And that's why this situation feels so intractable. The video, intentionally or not, settled that debate in favor of firm boundaries. Charles has shown his hand. The question now is whether this approach will strengthen the monarchy by demonstrating principled consistency, or weaken it by appearing rigid and unforgiving in an age that values family loyalty and emotional intelligence. The court of public opinion divided reactions. When news of King Charles's video broke, it triggered immediate and sharply divided reactions across media platforms, polling organizations, and public forums. The response revealed not just opinions about this specific incident, but deeper tensions about the monarchy's role, fairness in family dynamics, and competing values of institutional protection versus personal loyalty. Major news outlets framed the story in dramatically different ways, depending on their typical editorial stance. The BBC's coverage emphasized the constitutional angle, discussing the precedent of royal non-intervention in scandal, and Charles's consistency in applying it to both Andrew and Meghan. CNN focused more heavily on family dynamics and the personal dimension of the rift, with commentary emphasizing how public the rejection was. Tabloids, predictably, went for maximum sensationalism. Headlines screamed variants of "King banishes Meghan" and "Royal family cuts off Duchess," often with minimal context about the actual substance of the video or the distinction between Meghan's peripheral mention in documents and any actual Epstein involvement. Conversely, #SupportMeghan and variations thereof trended among those viewing the video as cruel and unfair. She has literally no connection to Epstein except her name being mentioned once by him, noted one viral thread. Charles protected Andrew for years despite actual involvement, but won't defend Meghan against completely false associations. The double standard is blatant. The racial dimension of the situation, while often unspoken in traditional media coverage, figured prominently in online discussions. Many pointed out that Meghan, as the first mixed-race member of the modern royal family, has faced uniquely intense media scrutiny and harassment from her first association with Harry. Her treatment has been contrasted repeatedly with that of Kate Catherine, who faced far gentler coverage despite early tabloid focus on her commoner background. In this context, Charles's refusal to protect Meghan from baseless Epstein associations while she's facing what many view as racially motivated attacks reads, to critics, as part of a larger pattern of the institution failing to protect her. Supporters of this view note that when racist articles about Meghan appeared, the palace rarely issued corrections or condemnations, whereas similar attacks on other royals generated swift responses. Polling data revealed fascinating generational and ideological divides. A YouGov survey conducted in October 2025 found that 79% of respondents over 65 supported Charles's firm stance on accountability in scandal-related matters, viewing it as appropriate for a modern monarchy. Among 18 to 34-year-olds, that number dropped to 43%, with 51% viewing such interventions as overly harsh and lacking in family loyalty. The same poll showed that 62% of overall respondents approved of King Charles's handling of royal matters generally, a modest uptick from previous months, suggesting that decisive action, even controversial action, can boost public confidence in leadership. Yet 29% still viewed him negatively, and when respondents were asked specifically about the Meghan situation, approval dropped to 54%. These numbers matter immensely for understanding reactions to Charles's video. Older demographics, more traditional in values, and more deferential to institutional authority, generally view his stance as appropriate boundary setting. Younger demographics, more oriented toward individual rights and skeptical of hierarchical institutions, tend to view it as cruel abandonment of a family member who's already faced massive harassment. The video's legacy in public opinion is still being written. In the immediate aftermath, it dominated news cycles and generated intense discussion. But as weeks have passed, attention has shifted to other royal events and controversies. Whether it represents a turning point in how the monarchy is perceived or simply another chapter in ongoing Sussex drama remains to be seen. The question becomes, in trying to protect the institution, has Charles damaged it by appearing cold? Or has he strengthened it by showing principled consistency? The answer likely depends on who you ask, and increasingly, on how old they are. The uncertain road ahead. A monarchy at a crossroads. For Prince William and the next generation of royals, this episode represents both a template and a warning. The firm boundaries his father has established will likely continue into William's eventual reign. He has shown even less patience than Charles for scandal or dysfunction that threatens the institution. But he must also grapple with the reality that such firmness comes at a cost. Permanent family estrangement, public perception of coldness, and the risk of appearing out of touch with modern values of compassion and support. The children caught in the middle, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis, and across the ocean, Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet, represent perhaps the saddest dimension of this fracture. Cousins who barely know each other. A family tree with branches that no longer touch. What will they make of these decisions when they're old enough to understand? Will they view their grandfather's stance as principled protection of an important institution, or as the moment when family loyalty was sacrificed on the altar of public image? The Epstein shadow itself shows no signs of dissipating, with Ghislaine Maxwell serving her sentence and continuing to make periodic claims seeking attention or leverage, with ongoing civil cases and investigations, with documents still being unsealed and analyzed. This scandal will likely generate headlines for years to come. Each new development risks dragging peripheral names back into the spotlight, meaning Meghan could face renewed scrutiny with any fresh revelations, regardless of her actual lack of connection to the case. This reality underscores why Charles's position, however harsh it may seem, has a certain logic. If the palace were to intervene every time Meghan's name resurfaced in Epstein-adjacent coverage, it would become an ongoing project with no clear endpoint. By establishing that she must handle such matters independently, Charles creates clean separation, but also leaves her vulnerable to attacks the institution could theoretically help deflect. So what does this all mean for you? For anyone watching this royal drama unfold? Perhaps it's a reminder that even in the most privileged circumstances, family dynamics are complicated and painful, that institutions and individuals often have competing needs that cannot be reconciled, that sometimes there are no clear heroes or villains, just people making difficult choices with incomplete information and conflicting loyalties. For Meghan, thousands of miles away in California, the path forward is equally uncertain. The video has made crystal clear that there will be no palace support, no institutional protection, no welcome back into the fold. She and Harry must build their lives, their brands and their legacy independent of the family and institution that once defined them. In some ways, this clarity, painful as it is, may be liberating. No more hoping for reconciliation that seems increasingly impossible. No more seeking intervention that will never come. Just the reality of the choice they made years ago: independence, with all its freedoms and all its costs. The crown chose itself over the individual. The institution chose survival over sentiment. The king chose his throne over his daughter-in-law. Whether that choice was wise or tragic, principled or cruel, necessary or needlessly harsh, that judgment belongs to history. And perhaps, ultimately, to you. What do you think? Was King Charles justified in drawing such a firm line? Does Meghan deserve palace support despite her tangential mention in scandals she had no part in? Can Catherine successfully navigate her impossible new role? And will this royal family ever truly reconcile? Or has the divide become permanent? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this deep dive into royal drama, family dynamics, and institutional power fascinated you, subscribe to stay informed on how this unprecedented situation continues to unfold. Because one thing is certain, this story is far from over. The storm that raged over Buckingham Palace that October evening has passed, but the tempest within the royal family and the questions it raises about loyalty, power, and the price of the crown continues to thunder on.